Okay, we're recording.
Well, I want to welcome everybody to the Kern Fire Safe Council's community-wide webinar for March 2022. I'm David Stenstrom, and here this evening with Julian Neiman. And we have two great speakers tonight. They're from FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Administration. Christian Erickson is the Community Preparedness Officer, and Vincent Martinez is Regional Preparedness Liaison. So kind of the things that we all prepare for wildfire, but it's not just knowing how to evacuate or how to survive a fire, but how to recover after a fire. It's not a subject that most of us really want to think about, but you got to be prepared. And it means taking steps to rebuild or relocate or refurbish after a disaster like that. FEMA is there to help, and if we know the who and the where of rebuilding, the how will be so much easier. If you have questions for Victor or Christian, please enter them in the chat room. And at the end of the presentation, Christian and Vincent will answer them along with any questions that have been submitted online. And for you out there who are new to us, our website has a section where you can voice your concerns, ask questions, and give advice. Kern Fire Safe Council is a community organization. We are here to educate Kern County residents on how to prepare for, survive, and rebuild after a wildfire. There are many resources on our website, kernfiresafe.org. That's kernfiresafe.org to help you, and your feedback is welcome. So Julia, is everybody in the waiting room?
Everybody is in the waiting room, and I'd like to say to everybody in the waiting room, I mean in the Zoom room, to please stay muted. You'll have a chance to ask questions when we get to the question and answer period, but please stay muted because otherwise we pick up a lot of background noise. So we are ready to go.
Okay, well then let's begin. Here are Christian Erickson and Vincent Martinez.
All right, thank you, David. And thank you all for having us here again. This is our second webinar with the council, and we're excited to have been invited back. My name is Christian Erickson. I'm the Community Preparedness Officer here in Region 9 for FEMA, and I'll let Vince introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Vincent Martinez. I'm the Regional Preparedness Liaison and Contract Support for FEMA Region 9. And as Christian mentioned, thank you for inviting us back and speak with you today about community resilience, what that looks like. Back to you, Christian.
Thanks. So just for people who weren't with us last time, I just wanted to touch a little bit on our mission here at FEMA. We went over it last time, but I think it's worth looking at it once more. So FEMA's mission is to support our citizens and first responders to ensure that as a nation, we work together to build, sustain, and improve our capability to prepare for, protect against, respond to, recover from, and mitigate all hazards. As David said, it's not just about preparing and getting through a disaster. You have to be able to recover from one as well. So, and that can take a whole community, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Just to give you a little geographic context, Region 9 is the largest FEMA region there is. Our headquarters is in Oakland, California. I'm sitting there right now, but we also serve Arizona, Nevada, the entire rest of the state of California, as well as all of the Pacific Islands, including Hawaii, Guam, and some of the other territories. We also support the Federated States of Micronesia and the Republic of the Marshall Islands through treaties. So I think we're in 8 different time zones. I think the only other one that comes close is Region 10, because they have Alaska, but we beat them on the time zone thing. So, and then within FEMA, Vince and I work in the National Preparedness division, and this is our goal on a smaller scale, to coordinate federal preparedness resources and lessons learned and best practices to whole community partners, assist in fulfilling the identified resource need within prevention, protection, response, recovery, and mitigation mission areas. That sounds like a lot of government work, kind of a very government influenced paragraph. But what we want to focus on today is that phrase in quotes, the whole community, because we see, you know, you can prepare as much as you want, make a go kit, have a plan, but your neighbors are sometimes your best resource in a disaster, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. And just here, I wanted to also just touch on some of our outreach goals as we're trying to go through these things. So Vince and I do a lot of outreach, and when we're doing that, we want to identify stakeholders and determine multicultural outreach needs, link planning and outreach messages to community values and needs, develop outreach goals for each stakeholder group and the broader community, establish how to engage individuals and groups best and specify objectives and roles, and define the specific methods to effectively engage each group in a meeting, be it, you know, in this COVID world, digital communications, one-on-one, and to detail how these activities will integrate other planning. So essentially, it's really trying to identify what a specific community needs the most and connect them to the resources and people that are going to most help them get through a disaster. So I'm going to pass to Vince, and he can talk about why being prepared is so essential.
Hello, everybody. I guess one thing that I wanted to speak about today is the why be prepared. Are there any first responders in the audience or attending today? Or any retired?
Everybody's on mute, so they may not know how
okay.
to unmute, but
well,
I don't see anybody here that's been a former first responder.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you, I guess, a FEMA perspective in terms of our own staff at FEMA, and this goes out to pretty much all. It's important in terms of resilience to pretty much all first responders in communities. Is we, as this slide says, have a responsibility to provide essential services and services to be present in the face of a disaster. But in order for us to provide these essential services, we need to take the same actions, the same steps that we're asking the public to take. Because if we don't take those steps, we're going to be faced with these choices that we have to make, responding to the disaster or protecting the safety of our own families. And our role, our jobs may be hindered by that. So it's extremely important. And I know that FEMA, we provide internal training for this. I apologize, I'm getting a little bit of feedback here. I'm not sure if anybody else is getting it, but I just wanted to really make that point, extremely important. An example of that is Hurricane Katrina. Hurricane Katrina really kind of changed a lot of things in emergency management. During Hurricane Katrina, a lot of first responders were faced with that dilemma of evacuating and getting out of the disaster zone or staying put and responding to the hurricanes that were coming. They were faced with what to do with their families and their family safety. And understandably, a lot of first responders left the disaster zone with their families and headed north for their own safety and their family safety. So there's a lot of things that changed. And one of the things that really helped, one of the programs that really helped a lot of people, first responders following Hurricane Katrina, was a program called KEEP. That's CEEP program. That stands for Critical Employee Emergency Planning. And what that meant was First responders actually agencies linked with other agencies in other states. So fire departments linked with other fire departments in other states. And what I mean by linked is they got to meet the staff of fire departments, the admin staff, the dispatchers, anybody who was involved with the fire department. They got to meet them in person. Their families got to meet their families in those fire departments. And so what happened is when a disaster does strike, these families that have been linked in different states can go to those locations out of the disaster zone. So the first responders can focus on the job at hand in their role as a responder with the peace of mind that their families were taken care of. This really helps out, and this is a huge planning need with responding agencies all over the country. And it is happening now, and this is one of the programs that I mentioned. Another one is the Ready Responder program on our ready.gov website. It goes step by step in terms of being prepared as a responder and getting your families prepared so that your families are safe and you have a peace of mind that your families are safe and you can continue on with your role as a responder. Next slide, please.
Yeah, Vince, can I just add something real fast?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to add that while we're talking about first responders specifically here, I don't think it needs to be just targeted towards that, because I think we were talking about some folks who were certified in the CERT program that we have here, which is a great program if you haven't heard of. And I think it really illustrates how making a plan for yourself is really helping you serve your community as well. It's looking at your family's needs, and if they're taken care of, you can be your volunteer or whatever you want in your community and help others who might not be as fortunate as you or not have the same ability to prepare. So that's all I wanted to say.
You make a good point, Christian. This is important for first responders because they have to actually respond to the disaster. But the other thing, and to your point, is this also is for the private sector. Any agencies or organizations that provide services to the general public. In order for you to provide those services following a disaster, you have to be prepared. Your staff has to be prepared because you need to get back into business, so to speak, so that you can provide those services to those impacted by disaster. And this could be, as I mentioned, the public sector, the private sector, agencies, organizations, nonprofits. This all fits into that preparedness and community resilience goal. Next slide, please. Readiness, what does it look like? Our next phase in this presentation is going to be empowering the community to build resilience before the next disaster. And what does it look like? This is a challenging question that's asked a lot of time in emergency management and in communities, community town halls. And that is, how do you measure preparedness? How do you know your community is prepared before disaster? A lot of answers are you really don't know until the disaster happens and how quickly your community prepares. So we'll give you a few bullets, points to look at so that you can actually measure right now what that looks like. Next slide, please. Empowering the community. Here's some bullet points here of what a disaster or a community that is resilient before the next disaster. I won't read the bullet points all to you. Well, we're recording this, so let me go ahead and read a few of them. The community is connected and works together, creating trust while increasing preparedness and building resilience. The community is aware, and this is extremely important, of the hazards and risks and vulnerabilities. The capabilities are identified across the disaster cycle. It needs to strengthen. And that disaster cycle is preparedness, mitigation, response, recovery. The community has taken mitigating steps to reduce the impact of disasters. Individuals, organizations, and the whole community have taken necessary preparedness steps. And of course, the community has coordinated plans, capabilities, and resources to effectively respond to and recover from a disaster. We've got to understand that there's no one entity that can build resilience in the community alone. We here at FEMA can support in developing a strategy to help communities identify areas within these outcomes that I just mentioned that the community has not addressed or will, where additional action is needed. This kind of strategy really is about bringing people together to work jointly to identify and take action in those particular areas. It's also really important to understand that preparedness and response are inherently linked. Our response efforts are really dependent on how prepared, how resilient the community is. Community preparedness is a critical aspect of resilience. You know, in order to bounce back following a disaster, communities need to have the resources ready and plans in place, but it's also very important to understand that preparedness is not enough. In order to recover well, the community needs to have the connections and skills and resources identified to draw upon following a disaster. Again, we can assist in bringing communities together to collaborate in the planning and resourcing and execution of disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. What's important to know, though, is that we are here to support, to provide resources, but this has to come from within the community. It has to be community-led. There has to be a vested interest in community resilience within your individual community. And it looks as though, obviously, Kern County, your fire council is one entity that has that ability and has that vested interest. It's about pulling more organizations and agencies together, which my understanding is that you're doing that now. And that's the key first step. It's now about identifying assets, gaps, and networking, pulling a lot of people together to address these needs. One example I would like to give is many years ago, I worked at Hood River, Oregon. I was working with the Red Cross at a community, Hood River community, that was along a river, the Columbia River in Oregon. Every year they had to face a lot of flooding. And every year there was always a town hall meeting with angry citizens stating that the responders were delayed in addressing their particular needs and delayed in responding to the flooding. So there was a town hall meeting, and it brought all the local community together, first responders together, the mayor and local leadership. And there was a discussion that was had in terms of what can be done, why there was delay. Red Cross played an important role in addressing these issues. And what happened was there was, as I mentioned earlier in a slide before, a count of how many people in their community had taken CPR classes, had taken preparedness classes, had taken shelter operations trainings and such. And there were very few individuals that had taken any of those courses or even knew that those courses were available. Now, the Red Cross offers those trainings for free. So the Red Cross took a leadership role in this town hall meeting and offered this training to the community. What literally happened was you went from 4 Red Cross volunteers in that community before this discussion to 3 months down the road having 25 Red Cross volunteers. You had, out of the 25, you had 10 that took shelter operations trainings. You had the fire department that identified potential shelters within their community. To see what happened after the next flooding season, them being able to have the keys to their own shelter operations, the Red Cross actually took on all liability for the facility or the building that that was used for the shelter, and the people coming together. They immediately knew when, and I got to spend the night in the shelters with them and assist them and to support them at that particular time. The community had the lead. The community had already identified those with mobility issues, access functional needs, those that were in wheelchairs that needed to be taken care of. There wasn't a who are we missing? It was, they immediately had assignments of this, we're approaching this flood next week, so let's go speak with Bob, who has access and functional needs, to make sure that we are going to come and get him and bring him to the shelter. This was all planning that happened before the flooding event. Their ability and their recovery time following the flooding season was literally cut in half by them being able to drive and own their own community. And their resilience was extraordinary, the way they showed that resilience. And this in a nutshell it exemplifies what it means to plan, what it means to train, and what it means to know your resources. And our goal at FEMA is to be able to help identify those resources for communities and maybe facilitate that type of training. Next slide, please. Readiness, what does it look like? Here I mentioned the number of individuals in a community trained in personal preparedness. This bullet point here, number of individuals in the community trained in CPR first aid. I believe I went through these. The number of businesses that redesign their own emergency response and continuity of operations plans. These are things that you can actually look at and ask that question and find the number and see how and what they're actually doing and how you can increase that number. Next slide, please. Now, here are more here. The number of community-based and maintained disaster supply caches. The number of community trained and organized response volunteers. Number of people who have been trained. Number of shelters identified, equipped, and shelter manager staff trained. These are all things that community, Hood River community took in and took some type of action to get that ready. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that preparedness and readiness can often, I think, in my opinion, be hard to measure. Sometimes, you know, if something's well prepared, you don't, I mean, it's measuring the absence of a number. You know, you don't want fatalities or injuries. And I think a lot of this stuff really helps a community, you know, have a checklist, which I think is a very important thing in emergency preparedness that is somewhat hard to do, honestly, to try to say what do we have and what goals can we attain to make our full community more prepared. So I would encourage folks to write these down and really try to see if you can make them goals for your own communities. So I'll move forward.
Yeah, and one more thing that Christian mentioned, if you have any questions or we can assist with possibly identifying these resources, please give us a holler and we'll do what we can to assist you in that. The next slide here, we're going to speak a little bit about financial preparedness. And I know we kind of covered this, I believe, in our last presentation, but it's extremely important. We won't go into too much detail in regard to financial preparedness, other than the shocking numbers that people may find. Is 6 in 10 households in America experience at least one financial disaster a year. Next slide, please. About 1/3 of American families do not have any savings. Next slide. And almost half of Americans would struggle to come up with $400 to help cover an emergency. What's extremely important here, and there's a lot of important aspects of this presentation, but financial preparedness is important. Community resilience starts with individual resilience. and then the community. So if individuals are pretty resilient, that says a lot about your community and how resilient that community is. Financial first aid is also a part that needs to be taken seriously, and people really need to take a look at, because financial first aid, one second here. Financial first aid is really about pulling your documents together, account numbers, tax statements, insurance policies, as the slide said, card titles, deeds to property. We have what we call a financial first aid kit, or EFAC, on the ready.gov website. It's ready.gov/financial preparedness. There, it basically takes 4 simple steps to financial preparedness. It's assess and compile. What that is gather your important financial documents and contacts. Review. You want to review your insurance policies and financial paperwork to be sure that they are still accurate and current. Safeguard. You want to store and paper and electronic copies of all files in a safe location. A lot of folks use external hard drives. A lot of people use flash drives to put them electronically, your documents electronically. You can get flash drives encrypted as well so that they're safe. But whatever you do, you want to keep that. If you have electronic copies, you also want to have a hard copy as a backup, just in case. And you also want to revisit and update your information regularly. Updates are especially important when significant changes in your life occur. This information really helps out if you have to evacuate. If anybody has experienced being in a shelter, a lot of times, if it's a big disaster, a lot of flooding, for instance, and you go to a shelter, typically there is a long line of people trying to get assistance and get registered. A lot of these folks in line don't have any of this information on hand. So there's a lot of, it delays that process. There's a lot of research and a lot of, doctor's name and telephone numbers, insurance policy numbers, medications, the dosage of the medications. All of this stuff is really information if that is needed. But if you have all of this information in this particular EFAC or a financial first aid kit, it speeds up the process. It speeds up your recovery process, and it really assists in registering for shelters. Next slide, please. So right now, basically, in a nutshell, to summarize what we spoke about today, your neighbors and the people you know will be most valuable resources when facing a disaster. You'll probably be leaning on your neighbors, first responders, more than you will be possibly your duct tape and your Go Kit. Your Go Kit is extremely important, but your neighbors and your network within your neighborhood really help with the recovery efforts, response and recovery efforts. Know about and plan for those community in the community that need special attention. As I mentioned in the Hood River flooding disasters in Oregon, they have a plan for those with special needs, and they took care of that circumstance. Have a plan as a community, not just as individuals or communities, or individuals and families. And emergency preparedness, and especially emergency recovery, are done as collectively. Remember that preparedness and response efforts are really dependent on how resilient the community is. And I think that might be it. Kristen, next slide. Oh, resources. Here's a list of resources. I know I mentioned a couple of them earlier in the presentation today, but your financial first aid kit is your link there. Your Ready Responder link is there. Also, the SPIRT program for those of you interested in community emergency response teams. There's also a kids section on our ready.gov website. Great information for children. Children should, if you can, have their own individual kids go kit, if you will. There's a list there that can assist you. Information about the pandemic, and of course, also with the private sector and business leaders. There's a lot of information there. This covers a lot in terms of your community members. And again, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to Christian or I, and we'll be more than happy to guide you in the right direction or possibly answer questions for you. Next slide, please. I think that was it. Are there any questions at all? I don't know if you want to open up to questions.
You know what? I want to thank you guys. This is I was writing the whole time. Yeah, it's and it was great information, and I want to thank you for being with us tonight. Julia, do we have any questions?
We do have some questions, and I want to address first, BJ, I see your hand up. Give me just a minute. I was asked if it's possible to get copies of the slides and the recording, and I just want to say yes. In a few days, this will be up at the Kern Fire Safe Council Facebook page and on their website. So watch for that, and I'll make an announcement on, I'll post it on Facebook as soon as we render the video to have it ready to post. So you'll be able to get a copy of it. Thank you guys. This was amazing information and so important. You know, I've had experience with participating in a community resiliency project. It was a 3-year project in LA County. And one of the hardest things, we're getting feedback. Can everybody make sure you're still muted, please? Thanks. One of the hardest things was getting buy-in from not only the residents, but from businesses around too. Do you have any suggestions on a great way to recruit people and actually get them to see the value in this?
You know, that's a good question. As we all know, in emergency management, most people are aware that they're in earthquake country, they're in wildfire country, but have they taken any steps to prepare or plans to where they're going to go and how they're going to get there, type of thing? And it's amazing to see the number, the little number, the small percentage that actually have, because one of the biggest is they don't have time, or it's not going to happen to them. For me, it's, and I think in our messaging, and that's a really a hard question to ask, because we're trying as well to reach folks and to not just provide information, but to have a message that resonates with them individually, that it could happen. An example would be when we speak on earthquakes. One of the things that I ask people before I talk about being prepared for an earthquake, which may be sheltering in place or evacuating, is how many people have been affected by a house fire. If I say how many people have been affected by an earthquake, I may get maybe 4 or 5 out of a room of 50, if it's a catastrophic earthquake. But if I ask people, those 50 people, how many people have been affected by a house fire, I may get a quarter of them that may raise their hand.
Wow.
So the house fires are the most common, I guess, most in terms of property damage, along with flooding, disasters. And once I see that, and either they have been impacted by it or they know somebody that's been impacted by it, then I know that I have to possibly, my message has to can resonate, go that direction. Because if you prepare for a house fire, now you actually are prepared for an earthquake, you're prepared for many other different types of disasters, because you'll know your resources. If you're prepared for a house fire, you'll have your go bag ready. If you have a house fire, you'll have an evacuation route. right? We talk about that because they have or know somebody who's been impacted by it. So finding something that resonates with them. And a lot of times asking that question at the beginning to kind of gauge how many people here today have been impacted by this or this or this. And again, it's the house fire thing is what's really astonishing. It's not surprising, but it's astonishing to see how many people have or know somebody who has, and then they tell that story. And people will start talking amongst each other about what they did, how they overcame it, how they prepared for it now. And that's one way of kind of beginning that dialogue in terms of taking some form of action. We're still trying to work on that messaging, but mostly it's people speaking with people who have been affected by flooding, speaking with people who are in the flood inundation zone and haven't experienced it.
And if I could add something to what Vince is saying, this is maybe a more general point on this, but in my experience, people tend to react better when you are speaking from a place of kind of hope and connectedness, or community, rather than fear. I think there's a in this industry or in this field, there's people want to say, be prepared, there could be a fire or an earthquake any moment, and really kind of scare people into action. And I don't feel like that always works in the best way. You want to come, I found it's better to come from a hopeful, community oriented vein of conversation. So
that makes a lot of sense.
I think that there are pretty much sometimes 3 or 4 steps to somebody possibly taking action. This is, of course, knowing about it, but actually incorporating it in your messaging. That is, a person knows about it. Here's the way it is kind of now. A person knows about it, they provide information, and they're asked to do something, right? That's pretty much it. But there's a lot of in between that's missing in order for somebody to possibly take some form of action. Is they know they've been told about it, but they need to understand it. And if they understand it, then they have buy-in. And if they have buy-in, then they take action, right? But the understanding part is extremely important. And how do we reach them? And that has to be more of how do we resonate with them individually? How does our message resonate with them? And that's where you get the understanding. I know that this might happen, and I know that I need to take this action, but they need to understand it, and they need to buy in. And I think they buy in if they understand it, right? And so that's the I think the magic to the golden ticket is what the understanding and the buy-in part. What is that? And that, I think, is more about an individual community understanding. And it is different for different communities.
Yeah, it is. Well, we're going to make it happen here. Okay, we have a question. BJ, do you want to unmute yourself and you can ask your question? This is BJ Saidi.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can see you too.
Gentlemen, good. Thank you for all the information today. My name is BJ. I'm the president of Chamber of Commerce, and I've been involved with Fire Council just recently, trying to partner up on some projects every now and then. This is something I think, again, we can power up with. My question to you from a FEMA standpoint, do you have a ground team that would come out to an area to assess an area of its strengths and weaknesses with the experience of disaster planning?
Well, if I may answer that, Christian, what normally happens, and you maybe, or folks in the audience may be aware, but typically, in terms of FEMA at the regional level, we actually work through the state and the county. So typically at the city level or the county level, they have emergency planners, community planners, and the community planners at those levels a lot of times part of their job is to actually go out and do community planning, do risk assessments in the community with the community leadership. But again, it all is about the community leadership. Who are they, and are they engaged with the county to have access to those emergency planners? But they do in certain communities go out and do a risk assessment, or the city or the community has had a risk assessment done. And with that risk assessment becomes the planning of how they address those gaps and those assets. But I from a FEMA standpoint, we do, but we work with the states to do that. And the states work with the counties and the cities.
Okay,
We-
very good.
We do
Two,
questions.
Yeah, BJ?
yes, thank you. Two more for you. I saw the link of information. This might already be in there. You have a list of preparedness items, because obviously there's some things we might overlook or foresee. Do you have a suggestive list for being prepared? Is that in your list?
We don't have, I don't think it's on here, on ready.gov website. There is a list. If you click on preparedness at the top, you'll have choices there. If you click on the, I don't know if you're looking, Christian, at all, but there is a list, and that list, remember, that list is a guideline. You want to personalize that list to your specific needs. What's important to you? There's a foundation there, of course, which is water, food, clothing. But what's extremely important to you, you want to be able to have in your go bag now, or copies or pictures, whatever it may be. Don't forget that EFAC. Don't forget your financial information. That needs to be in there as well in terms of sheltering if you need to evacuate. One other important piece is kids, children. If you have children, or you know of somebody who has children, a great community networking effort would be to assist them in helping pulling a kit together for children. And there's a list in there as well.
I'm not sure if you guys can see what I just pulled over onto the screen here, but
We do.
okay, yeah. So this is the ready.gov/kit link. You can, if you just go to the ready.gov homepage, which will be this, you can go to all these different tabs up here, make a plan, and you can see build a kit, and they have it very well kind of broken down by what is there. So, you know, we have different recommendations that we would put in, and if you need different languages, they have them there as well. And you know, and if you have special needs, you know, pets, animals, those kind of things, that's also here on the website. So I can put this in the chat if people would like. So
That would be great. Thank you.
all right. Yep.
And BJ, also, if you go to the
that is
website,
Mhm.
BJ, if you go to the Kern Fire Safe website, it's kernfiresafe.org. We have a list there too. The Red Cross has a list. The lists are readily available. There's many of them.
And many people would be
Great.
surprised at how many things on the list
Great,
or
great.
they actually have in their household.
And then one,
Go ahead, BJ.
right, good. Just one last thing. That EFAC pack was great. I did notice the date on there said 2015. Is that the most current issue you have available?
2019. The slide where I pulled that from was
19 is your current?
2019.
I realize that good. Well, again, thank you for all that information. It was very helpful.
Okay, let's see. I think we have another question here about CERT. Yes, it says our community has a CERT program. Do we need to do anything else? Shouldn't our CERT expect members who aren't in CERT to be involved in community preparedness?
Well, that always helps to be involved. You know, the CERT, the CERT is open to anyone, and if they're interested in the CERT program, they just contact the CERT, usually the program manager, or a CERT member, a CERT team member, to express your interest. Just always remember that the CERT program is a pretty structured program, but our main goal throughout any preparedness programming is that you take some form of preparedness action. It doesn't necessarily have to be CERT. CERT, the main goal of CERT is to take care of yourselves, your families, your neighbors until first responders can get out to you. And then to assist them based on whatever their needs are within their community. But you don't necessarily have to do CERT in order to take those same steps. You can, again, build your kit, have a plan, get informed about where you're going to go and how you're going to get there in terms of shelter operations, or if you need to evacuate, or if you need to shelter in place. All that information is on ready.gov website. And that to us is our main goal. It's for people to just take the steps to be prepared just in case you have to evacuate or shelter in place, and that you stay safe. CERT is another program so that you can help yourself and your neighbors and your community.
And I should mention that doing CERT or taking those actions is a good way to kind of become a nodule in the net of community preparedness. You know, you become kind of versions of Vince and I being advocates for community preparedness in your communities. So if you get CERT trained, you know a lot more than probably average folks on the street, and you are suddenly a force to keep that preparedness going. And that's, I think, how preparedness can really take off, is when people see people in their community doing those actions, and you know, people they know, people they respect, and learning from example. So I think that's one of the best things about CERT and about doing the project, is it spreads kind of like wildfire. That's a bad
analogy.
but you know, spreads in a good way, not like wildfire. But
Yeah. Personally, one of the things that I really got from CERT was I learned new skills that I didn't have before, that made me feel a lot more confident in my ability to take care of myself in an emergency.
yeah.
So that was really, yeah, I would encourage anybody to do that. It's really worthwhile.
Do CERT and Red Cross and all those things for their classes and things, is there a monetary charge, or is there a grant or something like that, so that people can get the information, and you know, as opposed to signing up like a college class or something? You know?
Red Cross is free. CERT,
Okay.
CERT has some charge sometimes. Sometimes it's free.
It depends on the community and what agency or who the sponsoring agency or organization is.
Mm-hmm.
In different communities, it's emergency management, some it's law enforcement, some it's fire, some of it's community members. So some of them will charge for their CERT bags. I think, you know, it'll be different prices. Some don't charge. Some actually have them put their bags together with the items within their own households. But again, the main goal here is to gather, or to acquire that information, to take care of yourselves and your families and your neighbors until first responders get to you. It's extremely important. And that's the main goal. In terms of the stuff, in terms of that bag, depending on CERT programs, they'll describe what goes in the bag. But again, a lot of times people have those items in their own households and don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of cost, in terms of signing up like a classroom, the CERT program, typically you do have to sign up and attend the classes. There has been a lot of offshoots from the CERT program that I know of in communities where they take the CERT community training and then they have their own preparedness organization or club, and then they provide that same training.
Yeah. Okay, we have another question from Ed Brem. I hope I didn't mispronounce your name, but go ahead and ask your question.
That was perfect. Thanks. So I'm a member of a small private nonprofit recreational club in the north part of Los Angeles County. And with regard to fire safe community, becoming a fire safe community, there is some interest in our club of learning more about that for the simple reason that we've had some wildfires in the area. And all of us who have homes on the property now have had our insurance canceled and now have to go to California Fair Plan, which basically has been tripling our insurance costs. And I'm wondering if becoming a fire safe community could leverage anything around potential lowering of insurance costs, or if anyone's tried to look into that.
You know, that's a great question, and I would defer to our insurance, our division that handles and addresses and speaks on behalf of the insurances and ways to lower those costs and coverage. What we could do is Christian or I can take down your information. That's a great question, and we can guide you to the subject matter expert who could address those questions. And as a matter of fact, Julia, if interested, maybe sometime down the line we could possibly have somebody speak on that, on insurance.
Yeah. We actually did a webinar with somebody out of the insurance commissioner's office.
Okay.
And
that would be very interesting.
So again, you can find that if you go to the kernfiresafe.org website and
Okay.
look under the tab that says news and events. All of our webinars are listed there. And I forget her name. Peggy, do you want to type in with her name, Sally something or other? Anyway, she works.
Let me touch on that, Julia.
Okay, Ed, go ahead.
Okay, so Ed, this is Ed Reed from the Current Fire Safe Council. So let me kind of answer some of that. There's two insurance underwriters, two companies, Mercury and USAA, that are currently offering 10% discounts to communities that are FireWise. And when I say FireWise, there's a program that goes much in line with what's been discussed here on check sheets and checklists rather of things that you've done in your home to prepare that are covered under that program. If we can get 70 to 80% of the homes in our WUI or wildland urban interface communities to sign up, do these inspections, and we can get our communities, I hate to use the word certified, that's not it, but FireWise ready. These insurance companies will consider not only underwriting and homeowners insurances in those communities, but at a 10% discount, which to my understanding is much, much less than what the state of California is offering under their program. So I hope that answers part of it. And we're working on that. We're working to get everything together to start doing the inspections. It's something we're in the process of. There's a training that's got to go along with it. In the interim, we're going to find inspectors to do that work, and we're going to start getting our homes ready.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
And I should say, anyone who has questions that Vince and I might be better answered by someone else in FEMA, we have our contact information here, and I try to make friends with everybody, and I can try to connect you to the people that might be able to help. So if you would like to take down our information and send me an email or give me a call sometime, then I am available, and that's part of our service to the community. So
that'd be great. And I know that the insurance commissioner's office is working with Fair Plan to try to lower the rates. What kind of success they're going to have, we have no idea, but I know that she did say that that was in the works. So we just have to be patient with that. But yeah, we live in a community where the insurance companies are just leaving in droves. So nobody knows what to do about that. We have a lot of people here that don't have insurance at the moment because they can't afford their plan. So, okay, so I see, Ed Reith, you have your hand up. Did you have a question? Yes, no?
I took it out. That was from the comments I made earlier, Julia. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So, okay, are there any more questions? Is the last chance here.
So we just begin. We just all need to begin someplace. We need to begin with our bags, our go bags. We need to get for our families and stuff. That's probably, and the e-fax kit. Those are probably the most important things as far as on an individual level, how we begin. And then would we, is it recommended we know what our neighbors, what their skill is? I mean, how many people are nurses or you know, doctors or plumbers or whatever, knowing are like a neighborhood watch, but not for watching out, it's watching in, so we can find out who does what. So if we are all befallen you know, some disaster, that we know who's living next door and who has the skills that you might need.
Yeah.
That's
Like,
all just common sense, right?
Like Vince said, if you know your community's needs, you know what you have to do about it, right? So,
Yeah.
Knowing who's in the community and who needs certain things and who might have those skills, it's very important. And worst case scenario, you make some friends and make your community a little bit closer, you know?
Okay.
Well, and then to know what your community leaders are planning in certain circumstances and situations. Sometimes a block party helps out pretty well. The block party, the folks get together and they have this discussion with a lot of food. And if there is a lot of food, I might even show up and kind of help out.
Yeah.
I love barbecue ribs; they're my favorite.
Yeah.
But no, I mean that always helps out. That always helps out. And
Well, you're
you know,
not
town hall meeting, have a meeting together to have that discussion. A lot of times having a document, and I may have one where you have a person's name and what their background is. They have a backhoe, they have they're a framer, they're an electrician, they're they're a nurse. All of that is really important. And then you maybe have one or two or a committee work with that information. And so when something does arise, you already have that identified, all those assets identified, all those skills identified within a community.
Right.
Yeah. And it, you know, it works. It's just wondrous. When we did this in the Antelope Valley, we did in Acton and Agua Dulce in the high desert in LA County. We put an ad in the paper. We talked about what we were doing. We had a community meeting. And then in another flyer and article, we put out the word that we needed medical personnel. We needed, you know, EMTs and paramedics and doctors and nurses. We ended up with 29 EMTs and paramedics. We had 2 medical doctors and a handful of nurses that all came because we did not have one medical clinic in either community, not one. So we got some money, we bought some medical supplies, we set up a little emergency clinic, and these doctors and nurses and paramedics said, okay, if anything happens, we'll do load and go, we'll bring it to this little office that we set up in.
Perfect.
And it was amazing how that came together just by putting the word out there.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of retired fire department personnel who are always willing to help.
Yeah, there are. Well, we pretty much have reached the end of this webinar. It was fabulous. Thank you so much.
But if people come up with more questions, they should write them down and put them on the website so we can get these guys to answer them.
Yeah.
And even during the week, you can contact us on the website and we'll get you an answer. Vincent and Christian, thank you so much for your information. It was great. But that's all the time we have. Whoop-hoo.
Thank you.
So next month, we're going to have another webinar for you on the 4th Tuesday of the month. Watch your email or Facebook and Instagram for the announcement. And until then, you please keep your space defensible and your go bag packed. You got to be ready for fire because you remember you are living in California, and it's going to happen sometime. So I'm David Stenstrom, and along with Julia Neiman, thank you so much for being here, and thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Night.